Half a day, half a day, half a day. Guau Haguini para este na episode Fanachu. It is just me, si Miget Solo for this Fanachu episode. Today's focus will be on, as you can see behind me, my vinyl music collection, Hungyan. And so for the past 2 years now, me, with the help of my second oldest child, Akli'e, have been collecting as well. I've been collecting Chamoru vinyl for a number of years, but we have been trying to get our hands on as much Chamoru vinyl as we can. And then we have been digitizing it, and then we have been making it available on the Fanachu YouTube page. And so let me share with you real quick. If you are not familiar with the Fanachu YouTube page, you definitely might want to check it out, because it has a whole bunch of stuff in addition to our episodes of Fanachu that regularly go out, which you can watch there. You will find up to almost 300 at this point Chamorro songs that have been digitized from vinyl records from the late 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And so, as you can see, Akli'e and I have been digitizing these and uploading them in batches of 30. We also did a few for Christmas last year and the year before. We just put a few up just for fun, some more Christmas songs from the Delgado brothers, from Johnny Sablan, and so on. But we have done 9 batches. We're in the middle of the 9th batch right now of 30 songs. And so if you go to our YouTube page, you can find a wide variety. Now, remember, these are only vinyl records. And compared to the amount of Chamorros who made tapes and the amount of Chamorros who made CDs, it's a very limited number of artists and groups who made vinyl. I mean, if you look at those who made Chamorro music on cassette tapes, megagay na tautau. CDs, pareho. Pareho na megagay na tautau. There's so many people. Because by that time it was easier to record, it was easier to have somebody help you. You know, I had on Fanatsu a little while ago, see Tom Bejado from Stelstar Productions, who, you know, helped so many people, made it easy. If you had some songs, if you had, you know, some music, come in and for a certain amount of money, he would record you, he would help you fill it in with music, and then get you a bunch of copies from the Philippines, and then you sell them or give them or do whatever you want with them. And so Chamorro music, in the tapes and cassette phase, there's a lot more that's out there, but vinyl is relatively, comparatively limited in terms of how many people put out a vinyl record. And so, and one of the reasons why we do this is because some of these artists, some of these some artists, these albums, these songs never made the transition to cassettes, CDs, or to Spotify, right? Some of these artists, so for example, you will have some names that everyone is familiar with, like Johnny Sablan. Johnny Sablan put his records out on tape as well, and eventually made the transition to putting some of them on CDs. But there are a number of his songs that never made it onto a CD. For Gus and Doll have, they had a bunch of vinyl records. They had even more cassette tapes, and then some of their songs also made it onto CDs later. You look at albums like Mezcla Uno and Mezcla Dos, which were made by the Tzatfras brothers. And so the song that we were just listening to at the start of this episode, Tio Malefa by Jesse Rivera, you know, that first appears on the Mezcla Dos album. And then he later, when he releases his solo vinyl record, it comes out, he re-records it, and it comes out again on Maila Tabaila na Dos, his own personal album. And so a lot of the musicians on Mezcla Uno and Mezcla Dos never made the transition to having their own albums. You know, never got their own vinyl records, never got their own cassettes, never got their own CDs. And so this work that we're doing is, you know, in some ways, it's putting things that might otherwise be lost. We're putting it out there so that newer generations can also enjoy this part of our Chamorro musical history. And so for this episode, we're going to talk about some of the records that, some of the songs, you know, from the past year or so that I've enjoyed putting out there. But we're also going to talk then about the future of this project, in which we are trying to, you know, preserve Chamorro music, to promote it. And, you know, for me, as somebody who loves teaching the Chamorro language, wants the Chamorro language to persist, the fact that we went from everybody's uncle or aunt having a Chamorro record out there to nowadays, in which there's very few. In fact, you could count them on both of your hands, probably, the amount of people who are regularly creating Chamorro songs, original music or covers. It's relatively rare now of people who are trying to create new music in digital forms or an album in physical forms that can help keep this part of our culture, our identity alive. And so that's one reason why we do this, is we recognize that this played a big role in helping sustain Chamorro identity, helping keep the sound of the language, the sound of the people alive at a time when the language was going quiet in so many ways. And so that's part of that's part of why we do this. And so I wanted to share now. Let me Nanga. It's so hard to pick. It's so hard to pick. Okay. So here we go. Here we go. I got one right here. And so some of you may remember, if you like the Delgado brothers, they were a group of brothers from Agana Heights. They put out, let me think off the top of my head. They put out Parasiwan. They put out what's it called? The one with, oh man, why can't I remember the name of it off the top of my head? They put out the one with Si Laling Camacho, and then they also put out a Christmas album as well. And so the Delgado brothers have made the transition. So there are some CDs that you can buy with their stuff on it. But I wanted to share one of my favorite songs from it. Here we go. This comes from their album Parasiwan, Palalangpang. Zahu ano nakanta. I Gofrente si Tunadanya y Champotnya Hungan. I mean, but this is one of the things that I like about Chamorro music is that, listening to a song like that is not exactly my style or taste of music, but it reminds me of people who are important to me, who grew up in a time when the musical stylings of Chamorros was very much influenced by, certain Spanish traditions or sort of folk Mexican sort of traditions like that, si Valentino Gihalam Flores and so on. And so, but that song, what I love about that song though is it definitely plays upon sort of the silliness of it, the silliness of the culture, sort of the use of language in fun ways, and that the history of that song is that it wasn't meant to be like a real song. In fact, one of the Delgado brothers commented on a video for that song on YouTube saying that it was just filler. They kind of recorded it for fun, to fill in a spot, and then eventually they just decided to use it on their album. And although the Delgado brothers were not necessarily known for sort of that style of more fun improvisational music, they definitely had it in them. And so this shows what's it called? This definitely shows part of that. One of the things that's great about um, vinyl music is that it comes out like in the 60s and 70s primarily, although some people release albums in the 80s. And so it comes out, and you have this is the point at which there's a major transition between sort of Chamorro musical tastes, right? And you have in the 70s different Chamorros kind of asserting themselves in different ways as to what Chamorro sounds will be like. Now, eventually, sort of the more cha-cha sort of Bokong or Pangasinan style takes over and becomes one of the main ways that Chamorros think about Chamorro music in a very general sense. But you have different traditions at this time. You have people such as the Tzatfris brothers and the Delgado brothers who represent sort of this clear rootedness that, like, these are the ways that Chamorros have enjoyed music for a long time. This is the way the old folks sing. We are keeping this tradition alive. They definitely cover some songs, some English songs, but then you have somebody like Johnny Sablan who does the same thing, but also is experimenting with different types of music too. He's bringing in different styles and he's changing things up a little bit. And then you have somebody like JD Crutch who comes later, who dramatically changes things by sort of being very Chamorro and very hard rock in a sense, which was in many ways the opposite of Chamorro at that time. And so that's what I love about this time, is that you always have this diversity in Chamorro music, but you can kind of see the ways that these artists are kind of being the first ones to record something, to put Chamorro music in this way, to put this sound and this stamp, this flavor on it. Hunggan. And so I want to share now a song from somebody that I was fortunate enough more than a year ago to have as a guest on the Fanachu podcast. And so myself with the late Senor Kin Conception, JC Conception, we had started in 2021 going around virtually or in person and interviewing different Chamorro musicians, especially those from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And it has been a series on Fanachu of people that we have talked to. And I'm always hoping and looking to talk to more of those people. Some have given me the contact info for those who are still alive, who I can reach out to. And I'm hoping that in 2024, I get a chance to sit down with more artists, to talk to them, to get their perspective on what made them record in Chamorro at a time when everybody was recording and covering English songs or writing in English. What made them think that I should do this in Chamorro? Because I'm always fascinated by those stories, as to why at a time when the language was being silenced around them, why they decided to sing and record in our native tongue. And so this is Frankie Sanchez was a up-and-coming Chamorro musician in the 1970s, but he is best known today not as a musician, but actually as a martial artist. He was the first Chamorro to become a grand master in a martial art, and it was a great honor to basically listen to his story about him going from being a musician to then becoming a martial artist. And so earlier this year, I was very fortunate to come across his solo album. So for most people on Guam, they recognize Frankie Sanchez because he performed here for a while. He was part of a cadre of musicians that was performing here in the 70s and part of the 80s. but he has a song was on the original album for Casamiento. And it was distinguished because it was the only English song. Do You Remember Guam, written by Johnny Sablan. And so uh, Frankie Sanchez, and so in a way, he acknowledged that people teased him because Casamiento was this pioneering record in which it was the first Chamorro group album, like all these different artists, like Flora Baza Quan, the Chatfris Brothers, Mike Laguatnia, Johnny Sablan, they were all on it, and Frankie Sanchez was on it. And some of the other songs had English, but his song, Do You Remember Guam, is a beautiful song, Govdzahuadz Kanta, but it's the only one that's fully in English. It's fully in English. And so people teased him. And actually, when Johnny Sablan released Casamiento as a CD, renaming it something else, he did not include Do You Remember Guam on it. But I got a chance to get a hold of Let's Walk Through the Ruins, which is Frankie Sanchez's solo album, which unfortunately does not include any Chamorro music, but it does include a recording of Guam by Harold de Leon, which was originally made famous by Johnny Sablan. And so, Nita Ekunguk.
Tropical island. Came to Guam and I think it's here I will stay. Guam, beautiful people. Guam, happy they go their way. There I found my true love, and nobody can ever take her away. I used to wander from sea to sea, but now that I've found her, I'll stay here as it was meant to be. Soon we will be married. We're husband and wife to be, and live on the island. Gonna stay here and raise a big family. I used to wander from sea to sea, but now that I found her, I'll stay here as it was meant to be. Guam, beautiful island. Guam, coconut palm tree sway. Guam, tropical island. Came to Guam and I think it's here I will stay. Guam, beautiful people. Guam, happy they go.
Hungen, hey, Sidus Masin. One of the in learning more about Frankie Sanchez, for example, in his story, he was involved in some controversies, with the local media on island. I remember when I talked to him, some of the stories he told was that he had made comments that said that a lot of the radio stations were claiming that they played Chamorro music because by that time, the late 70s, there was much greater interest in hearing Chamorro music by Chamorros, but that a lot of the media was still just tokenizing Chamorros. They would just have a little bit here or there. And so he made a statement like that. He made a statement criticizing that, and he and other musicians got blacklisted for a time in which some of the media outlets wouldn't promote them or play their music because they had felt called out or challenged by that. And so, again, check out, if you want to hear more about that, check out the Fanachu episode with Frankie Sanchez. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that episode. And so, all right. So as you saw from that video and from the others, for a lot of these, so when me and Akli'e, when we digitize the songs, we also then, by putting them on YouTube, we have to put them into a video. We have to put them into video form. And so usually then we'll put information about the song at the bottom. So you can see like who wrote it, if it's in the liner notes, where it was recorded, because that's an important issue too. Because a lot of the music from the vinyl time was recorded in the Philippines for Johnny Sablan in the States. But then some, at a certain point, Johnny Sablan opens a studio on Guam. Some music gets recorded here. The Tatfris brothers then open their own studio and they record more music here. And so, part of those who want to know that history and understand the music in a deeper sense, sort of knowing that, we also try to put information, if we can, about the artists themselves, biographical information. So if you saw in the last video, the last song from Frankie Sanchez, he was honored when he was on island in the 70s by Governor Ricky Berdalio, naming him an honorary ambassador at large for Guam. And that Governor Carlos Camacho had done that in the previous term with Johnny Sablan, giving him a similar sort of title. And so, but sometimes there's musicians where, I find their album, we digitize it, but that I personally may not know much about them, and that I might not be able to find much about them. And so one album that we have been able to find that is like this is the album Marianas from Ben Sablan Basa. And so that I don't know much about Ben Sablan Basa, other than that he's from the CNMI, and that his album has almost no information on it. And so if you know anything about Ben Sablan Basa, por favor, sanganidzo, because we finished digitizing his, and in fact, if you go to the Fanachu YouTube page, his album is the one that we are uploading right now. I'm right in the middle of it. I just uploaded another song from him the other night. And so he has these songs, and some of them are catchy. Some of them are very clearly covers of English songs, like the one that we're going to listen to right now. But if you have any knowledge about who he might be, let me know, because I'm always interested in learning more and documenting. If musicians are still alive, if they're willing to talk, I would love to personally know more about what it was like recording Chamorro music, what their experiences were like. And then even for so sometimes people think that, the only Chamorro music that matters is the deepest and the most original. I don't take that position. I think that actually one of the things that made Chamorro music become even more popular was when artists and groups started to translate well-known popular American songs into Chamorro, English language songs. And that actually made people who weren't feeling super Chamorro or nationalistic, it made them excited to hear something in their native language, because they were already familiar with the tune, right? They know this is a Frank Sinatra song. This is an Elvis song. This is a Rolling Stones song. And so they know all this. And then it's like, ooh. So this is why, somebody like Joe Taimanglo, who I also was honored to have on Fanatsu twice, talking about his recollections from sort of the roots of contemporary Chamorro music. But this song, by Ben Sablan Basa is another example of that. Esta y Presu, from his album Marianas, is a Chamorro language cover of. Once you hear it, I think you'll be able to figure out what it might be. I love, I love that. I mean, because when for me, this is why the study of Chamorro music is so important. Is that, and for some of you, if you were around in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, your own experiences are important in understanding this. This was a time when Chamorros of a certain age and older were speaking Chamorro to each other still, but they were declining in their transmission of Chamorro to those younger than them. So while if you spoke Chamorro, you probably spoke it with your siblings, you probably spoke it with your aunts and uncles and your parents, but there was a constantly decreasing chance that you would speak it to those younger than you, your own children, your own nieces and nephews, and anybody younger than you. And so, yeah, and so that's why, but at that time, though, then we see why is it then that while Chamorro is slowly kind of being pushed out of more and more spaces in our lives, in Guam, it happens a little bit later in the Northern Marianas, but definitely for those in the diaspora, Chamorro is getting pushed out of our lives. It's getting pushed up to older generations, pushed away from younger generations. So then why is it then that some people start to record in Chamorro at that time? And for me, covering. And this is why I always tell younger artists and musicians today, don't feel like you need to write like an all new, unique, original Chamorro song. There are people who will do that, and we should praise them. But if you really love an English song, translate it into Chamorro and just perform it. Just do that. Do that and just put it out there in the world as an expression of you liking the song, but you also wanting to help keep the Chamorro language alive. And so because that can do wonders. I remember in a few weeks, we will be having the Casidza Showcase, which is the end of the year showcase for my Zoom Chamorro language classes. And I remember like the first year that we did it, somebody translated and then recorded an acoustic version of themselves playing Yellow in Chamorro, Yellow by the band Coldplay. And so some of you watching may not, or listening may not know what Coldplay is or anything like that. But for people of a certain age, you know, you've definitely heard Coldplay songs and you may enjoy Coldplay. And so it was interesting because you had people who couldn't understand Chamorro, but they were crying to hear a Chamorro version of that song Coldplay, that song by Coldplay. And so, you know, this is why something like that can help bridge, because somebody who doesn't speak Chamorro wants ways to connect to Chamorro things. And so covering familiar, popular English songs is a good way to connect to people to something that they feel disconnected from. And so, Hungan, so that's why I always, if people have songs that they want to, I've translated at this point hundreds of English songs into Chamorro so that people can cover them. Most people don't ever get around to actually covering them, but if you want to, I'll help. I'll give you my translation for a favorite song. Oh man, there. Putfin Huhasu, Minatsum Atdao. That's the name of the Delgado Brothers album that I couldn't remember. I knew it was Atdao, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was. All right, so for this, I'm going to share one more song and then I'm going to share a video. And for this last one, it comes from the group Chamalinian. Chamalinian is a very important group, very pioneering group from the Northern Marianas, but absolutely has had a huge impact well beyond the Northern Marianas. And so part of the group was made up of members, it's called Quirino Aquino, Frank Bokungo Pangilinan, and of course, Candy about the Taman. And so, their album, this is from their album In Grotto. We're going to listen to Memorias by Chamalinian. And after that, I'll talk a little bit about especially Candy Taman, who has passed away recently. And so, Nita Ekungukat, let's just listen to the song now.
Gian ghiền qua siempre nuevo na kondisyon. Tiu pare hujan pinapostan, coraçonmu acak gijujun, lo y memorias para recuerdo. Un día siempre en Guifiju, di mai gomu neni un Guifiju sa para recuerdo. Ya un día siempre en Guifiju, di mai gomu neni un Guifiju sa
Ooh, Biba, Biba, Biba. Now, okay, I have a question for those of you who are listening, because one of the games that I enjoy playing and that my oldest child, Sumahi, really hates playing is what is this? What is the English song that this Chamorro song is covering or sampling or based on? And so Sumahi really doesn't like this game because for example, and a lot of Chamorros I think have experienced this, especially younger ones. When you hear like a JD Crutch song and then you find out that it's actually an English song and then JD Crutch just recorded it in Chamorro. Now, for me, I don't care. I think that's sometimes Chamorro artists do interesting things when they cover or when they re-record English songs. So for me, it doesn't really matter at all. But for some people, it feels wrong. So, for example, like the fact that, two of JD Crutch's most famous songs are really from a group named Lobo, a guy named Lobo. And then so Sumai always is like, oh, Tizao se Lobo, Hutsatli se Lobo. She feels like it's traitorous that JD Crutch borrowed from this guy named Lobo to make such cool songs. And so what is this song based on? because I think that this song, Memorias from Chamolinian, is an Elton John song. But then again, the most of these songs are way out of my time. They're not in my generation. They're not sort of the music that I was actively listening to. But for me, I think that that song is I think it's an Elton John song. But if you hear that song and then you recognize it, because if it's from your generation, it's easier to feel it and recognize it and remember it. But for me, it's not. But I did want to sort of just make a note, though, that Candy Taman was somebody who was very important in terms of the development and the promotion of Chamorro music, also sort of fostering more connections between the islands, right? He was somebody who was born from the northern and the southern Marianas, and that he believed in reunification and he believed in collaboration. And he was somebody that I really enjoyed talking to. He usually called me up like once or twice a year, and so I would go by and visit him, or sometimes he would come and visit me at my work. And yeah, and it was interesting because, I've been a fan of Chamorro music since I started learning the Chamorro language, but my love of Chamorro music and my appreciation for it deepens and becomes more complex the more I learn and the more I connect to people. So, for example, my partner, the love of my life, Desiree Perez, familia Bonyo, she, her family is a musical family. Her uncle Danny was in the Casuals. Um, her her grandfather Josafat Maru Perez, was in the Bill Munya band and other very famous after the war musician. And so, they're in the family. Everyone is musically inclined and stuff like that. Her father and her uncles as well, different bands over the years. And so, I'd known Candy Taman for many years, but then it wasn't but then sort of by learning from my partner's family that Candy Taman intersected with their family, that her Ninu, her Uncle Joe, who was in the band the Cascals, that sort of that they had gone to Saipan to play, and perform there, and that then sort of Candy Taman had become interested as a young man in playing music, performing. And so he had come to Guam to help the Cascals, and that he had stayed with, with my girlfriend, with her dad's family, that he had lived at their house for a few months while he was learning about sort of, being a musician, following the Cascals and other groups on Guam. And so this is one of the things that makes this Chamorro music is important to me as a way to teach. It's a way to sort of learn more about who we are and where we come from. But I also love that the more I learn, the more I feel connected to others, because yeah. And so there's one final thing that I want to share with you. One final thing that I want to share with you today. And we've been talking about the vinyl collection, but this actually has something completely different that we are going to talk about. So our goal here for Fanatsu is, and so I know that Hafade Setlu Jeremy, we do have a copy of Eddie De La Cruz's album, and so it is in the next batch that we will be digitizing. We're going to do 10 batches of vinyl records, so that'll be 300 songs total. But then we have about 15 Christmas songs. So, we're going to have well over 300 by the time we're done. So sometime in the next few months, we will start uploading Eddie De La Cruz songs. We are halfway through the 9th batch of songs that we will be uploading. But speaking to the future of this, because as I said at the beginning, Chamorro vinyl is actually pretty limited. There's not a lot compared to the amount of cassette tapes and CDs that are out there. And so it really doesn't represent sort of the scope of Chamorro music, even for its time. and sort of some records are easier to get, some records are incredibly difficult to get. There are some records that I have been trying years to get, and I just can't find copies of them. And some people, when I find that somebody who does have a copy of them, they don't want to let it go because they know that it's so difficult to find these types of records. But on the horizon, so one of the things, that I find kind of funny though is I was teasing my kids because, vinyl records, there's a certain cache, there's a certain sort of coolness to having vinyl records nowadays. Whenever you watch a movie or a TV show, if a character is cool or interesting, then they've got vinyl records, but we have yet to see sort of that happen for cassette tapes. That cassette tapes kind of fall in the middle. Like if you're trying to buy from a thrift store, a vinyl record, if they know its value, then they might sell it to you for like $30, $50. There's some people on eBay right now that are trying to sell Chamoru vinyl music for $129 an album. And so, but cassette tapes, you can go to the thrift store and buy cassette tapes for $1, $2, $5. And so there hasn't been the sense of value associated with that. And that's unfortunate because there's way more Chamoru voices. There's so much more diversity in the cassettes, because that's when you get, because vinyl was something which there was a lot of barriers to getting vinyl records out. But cassettes, that's when you see the first people somebody who just likes to sing and puts out an album. They go to the Philippines for a weekend, they record something, and then they put out a cassette, right? That's what we see. And so this is a video that we released earlier this year. It's edited by Sumahi, my oldest child. And it is about Chamoru cassette tapes. And so here we go.
Kwastigi bloopers.
Ilang niya is spinning. Yan, kumapa. Tatsun. Listo? Nazu?
Nope. Okay, the 2.5.
Half a day. Inano si Michael Luhan Babakwa, Wahui, producer, zani host, pari Fanachu podcast. Za ulo ni Gofri Sisu, para hamin ay Fanachu, na insecto ipatan mami na para bayin kutehi, para bayin preserve, di dandan sa mo. Di plakasya, di CDs, di cassettes, lokwin. Gof importante. Sa di 20th century, sen bali esti dandan sa modo sa haazuda hit una laklam mo ilengwa hita. Yun chempo, and I megay na sa modo ti mapananga ko fanunita. Ti gof opan ni lengwahi gihano mi giman sa modo. Maulek sa guahadandero siya, si Sablan, si Jimmy D, si Flora Baza Quan, ni Manyan ng Tapres. Sa managwagwaha, baka siha cassette CD, pues oopan ilengwahin sa modo Taimanglo, fiesta, tenda siha, kihalami kareta. And so, estigi, ihinangay tagwi ni Pablo, esti na kahita. Afaga ihihalami esti. Mega plaka, mega CD, mega cassette. Banti gaigi Hugua sa 15. Tunggu, nita salah kayo familiar. Edit. Alright, let's do it. Nita balestico. Alright. Okay, let's go. Both excited. Sige Fanachu. In hehekanay, todo y placa y CDs y cassettes. Ni sinya in set. Sa pasapyahunay, angin tihita per hadzi. So angin tihita humohoka esti ibanhata, hadzi ang okitaw kong ipokagi. Holy lanya atan! Guahamaleta! What? After Halamesti. COVID? Oh! Okay. Alright, ni Tata Nesti. Si Jimmy D. Tisinya Humita na Puenge. Si JD Crutch. Makpo sila na laho. Si Remy. Si Remy and Jocelyn. Si Bobby De Gracia. Oh, at the good whiskey na tape tomorrow. Ooh, si Jess Castro. Si Rose Martinez Certeza. Oh my goodness. Si Jimmy D. Oh my god, Jimmy D. Esa na tauto. Jimmy D. The mega na tauto ti matumunay no lo si Jimmy D. Guiza Mas. I Danda D. Kagi si Boya Gwini. Si Jimmy D. Guiza I Dandero ni Bumendi I Mas Placards and cassettes and CDs siya. Ilek niya I Guam Business News na habendi maski un midzon. Mega na tato si Matumo ito. Oh, si Alexandro Sablan. Si Casey. Atan todo esti siya. So, Pago gi I YouTube para Fanachu. Sa Millennium 2. Oh, wow, atan esti. Esti na tawtaw ha type. Sa banti malingo I Tutungo of tiyo tungo gi finaglas of esti. Malingo I sleeve banti. So pas ha type. Gi esti na puppet. I kanta siya. Gi esti na tape. Si Frank Guerrero I pilam. Again. So esta hamids and si Akli'e. Si Bokongo. Este in pepega maski dos shentu na kantan sa modu napot masorda na kantan sa modu gi YouTube channel para Fanachu. Lo, syempre gi este na sakan para ben titihun upload digitized kanta ginin este I cassette siya. Oh man. Si Zeus Masinay na manyaw hamzu gi este na unboxing video. Ngayon fan malafa. Angan malago hamzu sumapoti esti kinalamtin mami put in keki protehids and preserve motnanay dandan samuro. Sinyan sa poti ham gi Patreon. Patreon.com/Fanachu. Hatsa Hugua Tulu na tears. Pari sa napoting sen kada una tawtaw. Ni sumaunaw gi Patreon. Put sumapoti man receive 1, 2, 3 na franela debate. Si Diyos Masi, o si Michael Luhan Bavakwa, Diyos, este ki otrbe. Biba, hungan. Wow. No, si Diyos Masi, no hamzu todos hungan. And so that is on the horizon too. We have collected hundreds of Chamoru tapes. And so our goal is in the future, once we run out of vinyl to digitize, we will start to digitize our Chamoru tape collection. And many of the songs, sort of the old school Chamoru songs that you might be thinking of from the 70s and the 80s and a little bit from the 90s, it's probably on cassette if it's not on vinyl. And so we get a lot of requests for songs that we can't find on vinyl or probably didn't originate on vinyl, but it's most likely on one of the cassettes. And musicians who were around in this time but never got the chance to put it out on vinyl. And so, as I said in that video, Hungan, esti kinalamtan mami, this sort of movement, this campaign that we have been doing to promote more music, to preserve it, it's all made possible by those of you who support Fanachu on Patreon. And so by supporting on Patreon for whether $1 a month, $5 a month, $10, some of you support at the Tulu level, which is $15 a month. What that allows us to do, though, is it allows us to purchase, because sometimes when we find Chamoru cassette tapes, Chamoru CDs, Chamoru vinyl that to help fill out our collection. It's not cheap. It's very expensive because sometimes, people that have it know that it's hard to find, and so they jack up the price, knowing that somebody out there who's crazy like me will go and buy it. But yes, and it allows us to keep putting this out there for people to listen to. And I appreciate, and final thing I wanted to mention is that the Fanachu YouTube page is almost to 1,000 subscribers. In fact, we actually had about 10 people subscribe to our YouTube page during this live stream. And so our goal is once we reach 1,000 subscribers, Sumahi, Akli'e, and I will be creating a video which will list the names of 1,000 people from ancient Chamorro times. We'll be using Spanish census documents to put out a list of 1,000 people from those documents and their names. And so if you're a fan of sort of genealogy, of learning about Chamorro last names, Chamorro history, then you will love that video. But we just need a few more people to subscribe. Once we hit 1,000, we will start working on that video. I mean, I know that this is a Miget Solo episode, but I've appreciated the chance to talk with all of you about something that I love. Zahu napati gi halami kotorata gi halami tenautauta zahu kadagwaha nai na oportunidad para be apatidzi nai. I appreciate any chance that I get to celebrate and to share this part of our culture. And so si Zeus masinu hamzu todos ni umega parume ekungok ajos esta kimanat li